Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift way back further than kings, pharaohs, or even the invention of shoes that weren't made from scraps of regret. We're going deep into the Stone Age. You're crouched low near a hissing fire, surrounded by soot-smudged faces and the unmistakable scent of something earthy sizzling in the embers. Your hands are dirty. So is your hair. But hey, so is everyone else's. A pile of strange mushrooms sits nearby, gilled, bulbous, kind of slimy, and nobody's entirely sure which ones won't turn your stomach into a war zone. But someone's cooking them anyway, probably someone who didn't volunteer. You watch as a leathery elder pokes the caps with a burnt stick. Sniffing them like that'll help. The sun is dipping, the air is cool, and your stomach is louder than your survival instincts. The mushrooms are sizzling now. They smell fine. Maybe you definitely wouldn't trust them in a modern salad, but here and now, they're gourmet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing our sleepy little tribe grow. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift one mushroom slice with a twig. It steams. You blow on it. Everyone watches. This is what courage looks like when you have no antibiotics. The bite is chewy, maybe a bit chalky, but not terrible. That's the thing about Stone Age cooking. It wasn't about flavour, it was about not dying. Your tribe doesn't have a word for culinary, or even chef, unless grunting at food until it stops moving counts. But you do have fire, and ash, and very, very low expectations. Most meals revolve around what didn't run away or bite first. If it sits still and doesn't smell like death worth a try. The mushroom you just ate was likely roasted beside a piece of bark, maybe rubbed with whatever fat was left over from yesterday's unlucky squirrel. No salt, no oil, just heat and hope. The outer edges burnt crisp, the inside slightly slimy. But still better than those boiled grass roots from last week. You probably won't survive this, if we're being honest. Between the mystery fungi, questionable firewood, and water that might have had a frog in it, your odds aren't amazing, but here you are, chewing, slowly, listening to the fire pop around you. Others do the same. It's a communal gamble. You all saw that one cousin last season ate the wrong cap and spent 3 hours trying to talk to a rock. You hope this batch is less exciting. Stone Age cooking wasn't just trial and error, it was mostly error. But your ancestors learned things over time, like how to tell if a mushroom would boil your intestines or simply taste like damp dirt. That's evolution, baby. One queasy experiment at a time. Mushroom roasting likely started by accident left too close to the fire while someone hunted lizards nearby. But once people saw that heat could tame a terrifying cap, the habit stuck. You wouldn't call it cuisine, but it was a survival hack. Fire could mellow bitterness, neutralize mild toxins, or at least make you feel like you were doing something to help. You notice the mushrooms closest to the flame have curled edges. That's the signal cooked enough to kill stuff, but not so burnt that your teeth bounce off. Some people prefer the darker pieces. Maybe it's superstition. Maybe they're just into crunch. You reach for another. This one's bigger. A pale cap with strange spots. It might have been growing on a log covered in bird poop. No one asked. You take a bite. It's bitter. Not bad. Just enough to make your tongue question your decision-making. You chew slowly, hoping for the best. Nearby, someone coughs. Another makes a face. You all keep eating anyway. That Stone Age mealtime no menu, no substitutions, and zero idea what's really going on in your stomach until it's too late. And forget hygiene. You're cooking mushrooms with the same fingers you used to pick ticks off your shoulder earlier. The fire isn't just for food, it's your closest thing to sterilization. That, and pretending you didn't just lick a beetle leg by accident. Historians still argue whether prehistoric humans truly understood which mushrooms were safe, or if they just relied on observation and sheer luck. Maybe they watched animals. Maybe they watched each other. Maybe that's why you had fewer cousins this spring. Either way, the knowledge passed down, not in words, not in books, but in the muscle memory of hands reaching for certain caps and leaving others alone. One generation's disaster was the next family recipe. Quirky fact. Some archaeologists believe early humans may have used certain mushrooms not just for food, but for ceremony, especially the hallucinogenic ones. Imagine tripping under the stars because your dinner was too spiritual. Beats going to bed hungry, I guess. So here you sit, firelight flickering on your face, mushrooms slowly disappearing from the stone slab where they'd been sliced with a flint knife. No one speaks, not out of reverence, more out of caution. You're all listening to your stomachs, waiting. So far, so good. Tomorrow, you'll forage again, you'll crouch in damp underbrush, sniffing the ground for lumps that might feed or end you. You'll poke at bark, turn over logs, and hope the ants don't bite your hand this time. You'll bring back another handful of mysterious caps to toss into the flames. But tonight, you roast, you chew, you survive. You wake up the next morning still breathing, still upright, still mildly surprised. The mushrooms didn't kill you. That's something. Your stomach only did one nervous cartwheel during the night, and nobody had to dig an emergency latrine. A win in any era, really. Your hands are cold as you stretch, the dawn mist curling around your ankles like a damp, curious cat. Across the ashes, one of the elders is poking at the fire again, coaxing the embers back to life. Smoke coils lazily upward, carrying the faint scent of last night's mystery fungi, which are now crusted black in a forgotten corner of the stone slab. You shuffle over, sniffing the air. The same elder grunts at you and tosses a piece of bark into the flames. You nod, because that's what passes for conversation before sunrise. And then you see it. The newest addition to the ash pile, a mushroom you didn't gather. It's fat and pale, its cap almost waxy. Looks like it grew in the shadow of a rotting tree trunk, somewhere no sane person would crawl without risking a tick apocalypse. And yet here it is, roasted, charred on one edge, and still vaguely steaming. You raise your eyebrows at the elder. He shrugs. This is how culinary breakthroughs happen. Accident, mild peer pressure, and a shrug. Maybe a storm hit last night, knocked a log over onto a patch of fungus. Maybe someone tripped and dropped their bundle. Either way, the mushroom's been cooked, and if it's already cooked, well, someone bites into it. Not you, thankfully. One of the more enthusiastic taste testers, the kind who thinks every new food is probably fine. They chew, they wait, you all watch. Seconds pass, then minutes. No seizures, no screaming, no sudden visions of talking elk. Encouraged. A second person tries it, then a third. This is how it goes. You all know the rules by now. The first few bites are taken by people with nothing left to lose or a dangerously inflated sense of adventure. You wait your turn. Not because you're wise, necessarily, but because you've seen enough mushroom roulette to know that letting someone else go first is just good policy. What none of you know is that this was likely the first time anyone roasted that species of mushroom. Stone Age food innovation didn't come from recipes, it came from randomness, and courage, and maybe a little desperation. Historians still argue whether early humans had any consistent mushroom taxonomy at all. There's no evidence of names, not even symbols carved into bark or stones to mark the good kinds from the death kinds. Just memory, smell, texture, gut instinct, and sometimes literal gut pain. The mushroom that's being passed around now, it tastes smoky. Someone says, kind of nutty, soft but not mushy. That's about as detailed as your reviews get. You're living in an age where not bitter is high praise and made me less hungry as a culinary award. And what's even more fascinating is how these early mushroom encounters might have shaped entire diets. A single edible find could mean weeks of reliable nutrition, assuming you could recognize the same cap again in a different patch of forest. Your memory becomes your cookbook. Your gut reaction becomes your recipe log. But the kicker, you rarely find mushrooms alone. This particular fungus had grown alongside a fallen branch, and that branch, now scorched, still carries the scent of resin and rot. Someone sniffs it and gets curious. They toss a few more pieces of that same wood onto the fire, and suddenly, by sheer accident, you've discovered a primitive form of flavouring. When the next mushroom batch is roasted with those logs, they taste different, sharper, smokier, like someone seasoned them with something besides dirt. No one knows the word terpenes, but your noses do. Your brain likes this smell. It feels right. Welcome to the first accidental truffle fry. Not made from actual truffles. No. But it's the same energy, earthy, pungent, strange and oddly appealing. Some in your group start seeking out the same tree bark again. They rub it on rocks. They try to dry it. One person chews on it for fun and nearly chokes. So maybe not that part, but the idea is planted certain woods pair well with certain mushrooms. Cooking isn't just survival. It's beginning to flirt with enjoyment. Here's the quirky part. Some researchers believe these kinds of primitive flavour pairings could have helped trigger early food rituals. Think about it. You eat something that tastes better than expected, so you tell others. Next time you find the same bark or mushroom, it becomes a shared event, maybe even a special night. Light a bigger fire, share smaller bites. Watch the stars together. It's not a dinner party, exactly. More like a proto-feast, minus the cutlery and with more biting flies. And like all important discoveries, someone ruins it almost immediately. One overeager forager returns later with bark from a similar-looking tree. Slightly different colour, slightly different smell. They don't notice. You don't either. Until the next batch of mushrooms tastes like sour vinegar and makes someone's tongue swell up like a berry. Lesson learned. Kind of. From then on, someone in the group insists on smell-checking every log. Another person decides to keep a pile of safe wood in a corner of the camp. You roll your eyes, but silently appreciate it. You're not sure if it's caution or the birth of neurotic food prep, but you'll take it. Cooking mushrooms isn't just about not dying anymore. It's becoming a process, a method. You're refining fire techniques closer to flame for crispness, farther for a steam roast effect. You don't use those words. Of course. You say things like cook till dark or flip when steam stops. But the intent is there, and bit by bit, as the smoke rises and the caps bubble and brown, your people are building something sacred, A ritual born of hunger, of danger, of chance. You bite into a fresh slice still hot from the slab, and for a brief, smoky moment, you feel like you might live forever. You're gnawing on a half-burned mushroom when the scent of mammoth fat hits the air. Not actual meat, just a whisper of what could have been. Someone in the distance has found a scrap of tendon, maybe leftover from a failed hunt, and they're roasting it like it's a feast. You watch the thin line of smoke rise and feel your stomach twist. Mushrooms may be the daily fallback, but mammoth, that's the dream. The group stirs. I shift toward the fire where the meat sizzles. It's barely enough for 2 people, but the scent is enough for 20, and that's the problem. You look down at your mushroom slice. Earthy, smoky, kind of chewy. Again, the flavour's tolerable, but it's not mammoth. Mammoth is oily, rich, with a melt that makes your tongue sing lullabies, if you've ever had it, which most of you haven't, because mammoths don't like being eaten. You've seen one before, massive, shaggy, and glaring from across a frozen plain. You remember the elders whispering plans, tying sinew ropes, sharpening stones. Then you remember the same elders limping home empty-handed, one of them missing a tooth. That was the day your dinner was moss soup and 1 roasted mushroom cap. You tried to pretend it was satisfying, it wasn't. So when food's scarce and your spear arm's weak, mushrooms are the backup plan. A soft, squishy apology from the forest. That's the daily gamble, risk life and limb for meat, or kneel in damp leaves collecting fungal lumps and hope your digestive system doesn't write its resignation letter. Historians still argue whether Stone Age people actively preferred meat over plants or simply took what they could get. But one thing's clear: when the hunt failed, the forest floor became your grocery store and mushrooms were aisle 3. The challenge is obvious. Mushrooms don't fight back, but they're sneaky. One species fills your belly, another invites internal chaos. You can't read labels. You don't even have words for edible or poison. Your only tools are memory and the mysterious art of staring at a fungus until it feels safe. The stakes, immediate. A single wrong pick means an entire night of cold sweats and stomach sounds that scare nearby animals. You once watched a neighbour curl into the fetal position after eating the wrong kind. He spent 3 hours singing to his hands. The hands weren't impressed, and yet you go out every day, crouched low in the ferns, scanning for the subtle bulge of a cap among the fallen leaves. You poke them with sticks. You smell them. Sometimes you lick your fingertip and touch the gills. Like that does anything. It doesn't, but it feels scientific. Today, you find a cluster growing in the shade of a mossy rock, white stems, dark caps, gills that look like they were drawn with a bone comb. You squint. You've seen these before. Maybe. Someone called them the shivers. Not encouraging, but they're plump, unbitten by animals, no bugs crawling on them. That's got to mean something, right? You grab them anyway. Back at camp, someone else has returned with bark strips and a dead lizard. It's not much. You all eye each other's haul like Stone Age roommates fighting over the last banana. Eventually, you pull it all together. Mushrooms, lizard, bark, and start the cooking ritual. The fire crackles. A flat rock is shoved into the coals. A stick is used to nudge mushrooms into place. Someone drops a bit of lizard meat on top for good luck. The smell, vaguely promising. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some evidence suggests early humans may have used mushrooms to stretch meat supplies. A small bit of animal fat combined with roasted fungi created a fuller meal, even if it didn't taste like much. Basically, the original meat substitute. Sorry, vegetarians, this wasn't ethical living. It was desperation dining. Someone flips the caps with a bone, a sizzle, a pop, a puff of something that smells like wet dirt and smoke-kissed hope. You salivate. You're suddenly aware of how many meals recently have been variations of root stew with twig garnish. Then someone does something bold. They take a cooked mushroom, rub it in the lizard fat pooling on the rock, and eat it. They grunt, nod, don't die immediately. Now that's innovation. The others follow suit. You do too. The flavours elevated, still earthy, still vaguely spongy, but with that faint hint of meat grease. Your brain lights up like it's just discovered sugar. It hasn't. But you'll take the illusion. You don't talk much while eating, partly because conversation isn't really a thing yet, and partly because everyone's waiting for a stomach rebellion. But nothing happens. You finish the last piece and sit back, warm and weirdly proud. You've just participated in one of the earliest known acts of culinary creativity. No measurements, no seasoning, just fire, fat, and instinct. And your ancestors will do it again tomorrow and the next day, slowly refining the practice until a pattern emerges. Until someone remembers that the spotted caps from the East Hill are safer than the blue-streaked ones from the swamp. Cooking mushrooms isn't glamorous, but it's reliable. When you fail to bring down a boar, or when that boar chases you into a creek, it's the fungi that greet you with silence, waiting to be plucked, roasted, and nervously consumed. And tonight, you don't miss the mammoth quite as much. You crouch low beside a crumbling log, eyes scanning the underbrush like a suspicious raccoon. Your fingertips graze the soft moss as you lean closer to a bulge in the shadows. It's another mushroom, or maybe a pine cone that gave up on life. Either way, it's going in the pouch. That's your job today, gathering mushrooms no one can name, from places no one remembers, for meals no one's sure will go well. Welcome to the Stone Age produce aisle, where everything is brown, damp, and possibly deadly. You shift aside a fern and uncover a patch of tightly clustered caps. Creamy white, bulbous tops. They look familiar, but are they the kind that gives you energy, or the kind that makes your knees forget how to function? You squint, you sniff, you poke one. No help. Nobody in your group has a system for this. You don't say this is Amanita or that's Chanterelle. You say, that's the one from the West Path or the kind that didn't kill Auntie last time. The mushroom lexicon of your time is less scientific journal, more anxiety-driven gossip chain. Historians still argue whether Stone Age people used naming systems at all when it came to fungi. Some believe there were proto-words, grunts and gestures that meant safe or maybe hallucinate. Others think it was all just vibes and memory, passed down through demonstration and luck, your current reality. Every mushroom is either the brown one or the one that made Uncle foam at the mouth. Still, you gather, carefully, some by the base, to keep the stem intact. Some you twist free from the bark. You ignore the ones with slimy skins or odd-coloured rings. A few you pocket anyway, just in case someone else wants to be a guinea pig later. You're not alone in the woods. Around you, other gatherers mumble and grunt as they examine suspicious caps and suspiciously similar caps. There's an unspoken rule: never trust a mushroom that looks too inviting. Bright colours, bad sign. Glossy sheen nature's version of do not eat me. If it looks like it belongs in a fantasy novel, best to leave it for the squirrels. Here's a quirky little tidbit some anthropologists believe early humans may have learned which mushrooms to avoid not just by experience, but by mimicry. They'd watch birds, bugs, and boars. If the animal bit it and keeled over, well, that's a review you remember. You once saw a hedgehog sniff a bright red mushroom and scamper away in horror. That one never made it back to the fire pit. You remember that moment every time you see red caps. You whisper, "Hedgehog said no," and move on. Eventually, your pouch fills with a motley collection of stems and caps. Some are fuzzy, some are rock hard. One is already home to a tiny spider family, which now must relocate because dinner's dinner. You head back to camp. Someone else arrives around the same time. Their pouch is fuller. You both sit near the fire, dump your findings onto a woven mat made of frayed reeds and general optimism. The sorting process begins. You point at one of yours. The other person nods. Good. They grunt. You think it means no one died last time. You hold up another. A pause. Then a slow shake of the head. Bad. No explanation. Just instinct. You push the rejects aside. No arguments. Not today. You've done this for seasons now. Always gathering. Always guessing. You've seen people disappear into the woods and come back wild-eyed, claiming they heard trees speak. You've also seen people not come back at all. But tonight, like most nights, you settle on a few familiar caps. They get cleaned. Not really. Just scraped with a stick and placed near the fire. The elders do the cooking, you do the watching. As the mushrooms roast, you consider the absurdity you, a semi-hairless primate with a blunt stick and no concept of language beyond pointing and hoping, are slowly building a food culture. No, it's not French bistro level, but it's something ritual, repetition, fire and fungi, no spices, no sauce, just heat and maybe a bit of mammoth grease from someone's fingers. Still, the mushrooms cook, they hiss, the caps curl, the edges crisp. You inhale deeply. It smells faintly of burnt bark and last week's campfire, but also like survival. Cooking mushrooms becomes a group affair. Someone always offers opinions. Too soft, too black, smells weird. None of it means much, but it's comforting. Like you all agree that food can be debated, even if it's just fungus from behind a log. Tonight's mushrooms, surprisingly tender, a little woody, but not bitter. You all eat in silence, the way your people always do, watching each other for signs of distress. You chew, you wait, you swallow. No one clutches their throat. No one howls at the moon. A good sign. You stretch out near the fire, belly not full but not aching either. The stars begin to glimmer. Someone tells a story in low murmurs, a tale of a mushroom spirit who grants visions to those brave enough to eat the laughing caps. You've never seen them. You hope you never do. Because naming isn't the only thing missing in this world. There's no guarantee, no authority, no final say. Just tradition, cautious mouths, and shared looks that say, "You okay? Still breathing cool? Tomorrow you'll do it again." And maybe, just maybe, one day someone will carve a tiny symbol into a rock to mean good mushroom. A line, a circle, a slash through it for the bad ones. Maybe language starts right here, beside the fire, with a bite and a burp and a shrug. But for now, you sleep, with your belly quiet, your hands dirty, and your mind just alert enough to remember which cap not to pick next time. The fire crackles low, barely more than embers now. The mushroom scraps from last night lie forgotten on a flat stone, shriveled into charcoal curls. You blink slowly in the half-light of morning, your back sore from the ground, your mouth dry. Someone's already stirring at the edge of camp, probably the fire starter. Every group has one. The first to wake, the first to poke at the coals, the first to risk their eyebrows with a handful of dry moss and wishful thinking. You rise, stretch, and remember it's mushroom day again. Your pouch hangs by the entrance to the sleeping hollow, still faintly damp from yesterday's harvest. You pat it, empty, time to forage, again. But before you leave, someone calls your name. Well, not your name exactly. More like a grunt accompanied by a hand gesture. It means, try these. They hold out 2 roasted caps, warm and still steaming. They're small, dark, wrinkled, the kind that look like they might contain secrets. You pause, because here's the truth. Every mushroom you eat is a roll of the dice, and fire doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it just changes the flavour of the doom. Fire was a game changer for early humans, sure. It scared off predators, lit the night, kept you warm, but its culinary magic's still evolving. It doesn't neutralise all toxins, especially not the sneaky fungal ones. Some poisons just laugh at heat, others are mellowed or even vaporised. But how do you know which is which? You don't. Historians still argue whether prehistoric people truly understood how fire changed food chemically, or if they just hoped fire made things less murdery. Maybe they noticed they got sick less when things were roasted. Maybe it was superstition. Maybe the smell of burning fungus just felt safer. So you take the offering, 2 blackened caps, and sniff them. Smoky, almost like wet leaves and singed bark. You bite into one. It's chewy, bitter, but not in a deadly way. More like forest espresso. You wince, swallow, wait, nothing yet. The other one slightly better, almost meaty. You can taste the fire, literally. Ash sticks to your teeth. Someone nearby crunches theirs and mutters in satisfaction. Maybe just pretending. Either way, you nod back because it's the polite thing to do. You think about how often these early mushroom meals were cooked over open flame, not grilled, not seared, not sautéed, just roasted, maybe on a hot rock, maybe stabbed on a stick, often just tossed beside the embers and poked occasionally with a stick. Today, you're on stick duty. You gather a few cap-safe ones, or at least you hope they're the safe ones, and drop them near the fire. They sizzle, steam rising as moisture boils off. You watch for the signs the skin splits, the cap wrinkles, the edges curl inward. You rotate them, trying not to lose them in the ashes. One falls in. You fish it out with a bone sliver. It's fine. Mostly. That's the game. Fire, fear, and fungi. Every day. You remember that time last season when someone tried to boil mushrooms in a bark bowl. Didn't end well. Bark doesn't hold up well over open flame. You all watched it collapse like a soggy dream. The mushrooms hit the coals and caught fire. It was the most exciting meal you'd had in days, and probably the worst smelling. Still, lessons were learned. Now, you mostly roast. It's faster, simpler, less chance of setting the camp on fire. You poke the caps again. One leaks a dark juice. You decide that means it's done. You pick it up, blow on it, and bite. It's hot, too hot. You hiss and fan your mouth, because even in the Stone Age, nobody likes mouth blisters. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some researchers suggest that cooking, especially over fire, might have enhanced not just digestion, but cognition. The idea is that cooked food required less energy to digest, freeing up brain power for, say, tool making or inventing language, or possibly just coming up with creative ways to not eat poison, which, honestly, is a full-time job. You chew, it's fine. There's that word again, Not good, not terrible, just edible. And edible is the height of Stone Age cuisine. You didn't grow up with flavour expectations. Your palate isn't looking for umami, it's looking for will I see the sunrise. Still, sometimes you get a batch that surprises you. Once, a group roasted mushrooms near Pine Sap, and the flavour changed entirely. It had a sweetness to it, resinous, sharp, but strangely pleasant. You remember that night. Everyone looked at each other and silently agreed this one's a keeper. Then someone tried it again with a different tree and woke up covered in hives. Cooking mushrooms is about pattern recognition, repetition, trying things 10 different ways, then forgetting the 9 bad ones and convincing yourself the 10th was genius. You tell yourself this every time your mouth tingles unexpectedly. Around the fire, others nibble their pieces. One person makes a face. Another shrugs and keeps chewing. No one panics. That's a good sign. You lean back, letting the warmth reach your sore legs. The smoke curls into the sky. The stars are beginning to peek through the dusk. And you realize that even without names, without recipes, without any real understanding of what you're doing, you've developed habits, techniques, preferences. You like the mushrooms that crackle when they roast. You avoid the ones with orange gills. You've learned that smaller caps cook faster, and that if you place them on dry bark first, they don't soak up so much ash. These are tiny things, but they're everything. No one writes them down. No one teaches a class. It's just survival through rhythm. Every night, you dance that same anxious waltz: find, roast, eat, pray, and repeat. Tonight, it goes well. Tomorrow, well, tomorrow might be the night someone brings back one of those mushrooms, the kind that glow faintly in the dark, the kind that seem to pulse when you stare too long. You hope they leave those in the woods, but for now, the fire burns, and your belly is warm. You're still here, and that's enough. There's a circle forming around the fire again tonight, the kind that means something interesting is about to be eaten, or at least attempted. You wander over, chewing on a piece of dry root, which doesn't taste like anything except itself. A few others are already seated on logs or flat stones, the kind of quiet that says everyone pretending not to be nervous. At the centre of the group lies a batch of mushrooms unlike the usual kind. They're smaller, shinier, with a bluish hue along the edges that looks either magical or incredibly ominous. You glance at them, then at the people around you. Welcome to the Smoke Tent Taste Test Club Unofficial, uninvited and unwise. One of the older gatherers stands up, pokes the caps with a stick, and mutters something half prayer, half joke. Everyone laughs a little too loud. You've all been here before. This is how experimentation works in the Stone Age. You try something, hope it doesn't end in disaster, and if it doesn't, congratulations, you've just invented dinner. These mushrooms had been foraged by the river bend earlier, under a fallen willow. No one's entirely sure they're edible, but they weren't growing in dung, didn't smell like fish, and didn't have visible bugs chewing on them, so the consensus is worth a try. The roasting begins. Flat stones are shoved into the fire until they hiss. The mushrooms are laid out like offerings. As they cook, their shiny skins bubble slightly, and a weird sweet smell wafts up. It's not unpleasant, kind of like wet moss and honey gone wrong. You lean in, sniffing cautiously. Definitely not the usual earthy tang. This one smells like it might do something to you. The person next to you raises an eyebrow. You return the look. Historians still argue whether early humans understood the psychoactive properties of certain mushrooms, or just thought they were bad batches. But when strange behaviour followed certain meals, visions, laughter, unexpected dancing, it didn't take a genius to connect dots. That's how ceremonies start, or superstitions, or bad nicknames. The caps finish cooking with a slight blackening along their edges. A silence falls over the circle. You feel your heartbeat pick up, just a little. Then, the bravest or possibly most bored person reaches forward, picks up a slice, and eats it, chewing, swallowing, blinking, waiting. Everyone stares. 10 seconds, 20, then a shrug. The tension breaks. A second person grabs one, then a third. You hesitate. Peer pressure's strong, even without words. You pick up a piece. Still warm, still slightly oily. You take a bite. It's bizarre. Not bad, not good, just strange. Like licking tree bark that once had sugar on it. Your mouth tingles. Not a lot. Just a little spark behind your teeth. You keep chewing. Swallow. Someone across the fire hiccups and giggles. Another person starts humming for no reason. The circle begins to shift. People settle in, leaning on one another, eyes wide or half closed, and you feel odd. Not bad, not sick, but different. The firelight seems brighter. The smoke curls in patterns you've never noticed before. The stars above you seem closer, like if you stood up and reached just right. You could pluck one down and roast it too. A young voice near the back whispers, "I think I can taste colours." You laugh. Quietly. Quirky fact: modern scientists believe that psilocybin-containing mushrooms were present in Europe, Asia, and the Americas during the Paleolithic period. It's very possible that your ancestors stumbled into altered states long before they stumbled into agriculture. No one called them trips back then. They were just moments. Your fingers feel warm. The rock beneath you seems to hum. You lean back, eyes half-lidded, and let the sensations wash over you. No one's panicking. That's good. This isn't the batch that leads to vomiting or spasms or emergency mud baths. You hear murmured sounds, laughter, a soft chant, maybe accidental, maybe not. There's no language yet. But somehow, everyone understands. And the best part, the mushrooms don't seem deadly. You're all floating now, not off the ground, but in your heads. Thoughts feel slippery, like trying to grab fish with wet hands. You look across the fire and swear someone's face is glowing. They might just be smiling, or not. Someone begins to stack rocks. Another gently taps a stick on a log. Over and over, like a heartbeat. No one eats another bite. The mushrooms were a one-time thing. Too weird to be casual, too intense to be lunch. Still, no one regrets it. At least not yet. Later hours, or maybe minutes, someone vomits quietly into a bush. Not violently. Just a gentle reset. Others curl up near the fire, humming softly. One person clutches a rock like it's a baby bird. You're curled up with your arm under your head, feeling the earth breathe with you. The air is cool. The fire is soft. And somewhere in the swirling space between firelight and thought, a realization dawns: this mushroom was different, and now it's known. Tomorrow, no one will describe it with words. You'll just say that one and point toward the willow bend. You might cook it again, or save it for special times. You might tell the children to avoid it, or to wait until they're old enough to remember what stars feel like. Historians debate whether these kinds of mushroom encounters birthed early religion, trance dances, or cave paintings. Whether visions became myths, Whether the stars really were closer after a bite of something blue and wrinkled, all you know is that tonight you were part of the first taste test that didn't just feed the body, but crack the edges of the mind. And nobody died. So far, the morning air is damp with fog and regret. You blink against the pale light filtering through the trees. Your tongue dry and your thoughts fuzzy. You're not sure if you dreamed about flying with glowing elk, or if that was just the mushrooms doing interpretive dance in your bloodstream. Either way, you survived. Mostly around you. Others stir slowly. The fire's out. The ground is scattered with half-burned sticks, abandoned stones, and a few mushrooms that nobody dared finish. One lies shriveled in the ash, glowing faintly blue in the low light. Or maybe you're imagining that. You decide not to poke it. Today's plan. Return to something more familiar, more manageable, less mind-expanding. You're going to try the soggy log technique again. Back in the woods, you search for the kind of half-rotted, waterlogged wood that your ancestors have learned to associate with the strange bonus mushrooms that sprout from decay. Not the delicate, risky kind, but the thick, rubbery ones that often show up after rainfall, clinging to the bark like tiny fans or miniature ear flaps. They're strange, sure, but also kind of reliable. You find a promising log damp, crumbling at the edges, riddled with fungi. Some grow in tight clusters, others like little shelves. You run your finger along one and feel its leathery skin. It peels away easily. No slime, no bugs. You sniff, musty, but not offensive. Historians still argue whether early people understood the full relationship between decay and fungal growth, whether they knew that dead trees fed mushrooms and mushrooms fed people. But even without words for it, you recognize the pattern. Rotting log equals food potential. If you're lucky, you break off a few chunks. They don't look appetizing. They don't even look chewable. But something about their stubborn presence on these wet logs tells you they've got staying power. The kind of mushrooms that survive floods, frosts, and perhaps even amateur cooking. Back at camp, you prepare them the usual way, press them onto a flat stone and prop them near the coals. But these mushrooms don't sizzle, they steam. A lot. Within minutes, the fire is surrounded by a damp fog, as if the mushrooms are sweating out every drop of water they absorb from the log. One pops like a blister. Someone flinches. You keep watching. Quirky fact, some modern researchers believe certain log-dwelling mushrooms like oyster or polypore types were likely among the earliest to be eaten consistently. They're large, easy to spot, and not easily confused with deadly species. Not delicious, necessarily, but dependable. You flip one with a stick. It squelches. That's not ideal. But your options are limited, so you wait, letting the mushrooms roast until they stop steaming. They shrink, harden slightly. The outer layers crack just a bit. They're now about half the size and still smell vaguely like damp boots. You take a bite. It's chewy, like really chewy, like trying to eat a wet leather pouch someone left in a bog, but it doesn't taste bad, just bland. You chew until your jaw aches and then swallow with a sigh. Not tasty, but not dangerous. Someone next to you tries theirs and makes a face like they're contemplating chewing on a rock instead. You both laugh. A little. You eat another one anyway. These mushrooms aren't for flavour, they're for function. You remember the last time the meat ran out, and the roots were frozen solid. The log mushrooms were the only thing you could gather. They filled your stomach, even if they didn't fill your soul. That's the Stone Age version of comfort food stuff that doesn't betray you when you're already miserable. Around the fire, others begin sharing the same type. Wordless nods of approval pass among the group. One person breaks a piece into smaller bites for a child. Another carefully sets a few aside, placing them on a piece of bark to dry. Preservation. A new idea, slowly forming. Because here's the magic of these soggy log mushrooms: they don't spoil fast. Even when partially cooked, they last longer than the soft caps you usually find under leaf piles. That realization that some mushrooms could stay edible longer changes everything. You're watching a new kind of food storage evolve, without anyone saying a word. Someone places the drier pieces on a woven mat near the sunlit edge of camp. You glance at the sky clear today. Good drying weather. In a few hours, they'll shrivel further, harden more. Maybe tomorrow, someone will try to roast them again and see what happens. The mushrooms are chewy now. Tomorrow they might be chew resistant, but they'll still be here. That's new. That's important. A quiet shift in your brain begins to take root. Food doesn't always have to be eaten now. It can wait. It can be saved. Maybe that means you don't have to go out every day, scraping under trees and hoping your gut doesn't rebel. Maybe it means a bit more security. Maybe. Historians believe that small food storage techniques like this, accidental drying, smoke exposure, sun baking, were the first steps toward early food culture. Not just eating to survive, but thinking ahead. For the first time, your meals aren't just fire and chance, they're planning. The mushrooms that grew from soggy logs, the ones that steamed like they were crying, they're becoming part of your future. You reach for another piece, less chewy this time, or maybe your jaw's just stronger now. You chew slowly, glancing at the drying rack, the fire, the people resting nearby. The air smells like smoke and damp bark. The taste in your mouth is bland and vaguely bitter, but something about it feels hopeful. The fire hisses as you scatter fresh bark into the embers. Not for fuel, though it does help, but for flavour. You discovered it by accident. Remember the time a pine branch landed in the fire while mushrooms roasted nearby, and everyone suddenly paused between bites like, wait, did that actually taste good? It did. Kind of. Tonight, you're chasing that happy mistake. You've gathered bark from the same tree, peeled it in thin strips, and are arranging it neatly beneath a layer of fat caps. No one says anything, but everyone watches. Cooking is no longer just survival. It's becoming performance, ritual. Everyone wants to eat something that tastes like something. You grab a lump of animal fat, probably from yesterday's rabbit, or whatever that creature was, and smear a thin layer on the cooking stone. It sizzles softly, a whisper of richness in a world where most food tastes like regret. You lay the mushrooms down with care. They hiss on contact. The bark beneath them begins to smoke gently. Pine, ash, faint notes of moss, and suddenly there it is again. Charcoal crust, your first seasoning. As the fire smoulders, the bark chars and melds with the fat and the softening mushroom caps. The result is a crisp, blackened coating on the bottom of each slice. Crispy but not burned. Smoky but not harsh. You crouch lower, sniffing. It smells oddly good, like something worth remembering. You flip one with a sharpened stick. The underside is blackened, sure, but beneath the crust lies tender mushroom flesh, pale and steaming. You taste it. Crunch, softness, depth. Not a flavour bomb, exactly, but in Stone Age terms, a full culinary event. Your mouth registers more than just not poison. It registers texture. A satisfying snap followed by the melt of steam-softened middle. It's the kind of thing that makes you look at your stick and think, hey, maybe I can cook. Quirky tidbit archaeologists have found charred food scraps in Paleolithic hearths that suggest people were intentionally letting certain parts of their meals blacken, not fully burn but brown, crisp, develop texture. Charcoal crust isn't just survival, it's early experimentation. You glance up, others are already reaching. You step aside and let them taste. One person crunches their piece, then blinks. Surprised. Not bad. Maybe even good. You try another. This one has a bit of resin flavour from the bark. Slightly bitter, but in a weirdly pleasant way. Like coffee without sugar. You nod, satisfied. The person next to you starts licking their fingers. Another tries to scrape off the crust and eat it alone. That's when you know you've made something real. When even the burned bits are worth fighting over. Historians still debate whether early humans understood why these combinations worked. Fat, bark, heat, and fungi. But they clearly valued the result. And why wouldn't they? It made a soggy, chewy cap taste like food you'd willingly eat twice. Someone suggests with grunts and gestures that the bark itself be roasted first next time, to get more flavour. You don't fully understand. But the idea is their layered taste. A primitive recipe is forming. Mushroom, bark, fat, fire, repeat. This is the quiet birth of seasoning. Not salt, not herbs, just burnt pine and animal grease. It works. You look around the camp and notice something else. Two people are paying attention. Closely. The younger ones lean forward. The elders raise their brows. Cooking, once just a task, is becoming a performance. Everyone wants to be the one who discovers the next great twist. Someone throws in a strip of dry grass. It smokes horribly. Bad idea. Everyone coughs. Lesson learned. You make a mental note. No grass. Another tries to drizzle a bit of marrow over the mushrooms mid-roast. The fat sizzles violently and flings a hot speck onto their foot. They yelp. You all laugh. But when the mushrooms come off the fire, they're somehow even better. The marrow crisped along the cap, deepening the flavour. Another happy accident. You chew slowly, savouring. For the first time, you're not just eating to live. You're tasting. Deliberately. Noticing differences. Making judgments. This one's too dry. That one's just right. You like the slightly blackened edges. You prefer the thicker caps. You remember the bark that worked best. And suddenly, there it is, the spark of memory forming into method. You're still crouched in dirt, still wearing a fur that smells like the animal you took it from. But in your head, something monumental is happening. The kind of thought that leads to future generations writing about food, talking about food, obsessing over it. But for now, it's just you and the crust, crisp, smoky, satisfying. A microsecond of culinary joy in a world where dinner usually involves chewing and hoping. Someone taps your shoulder. They hold out another slice. You nod. They pass it over. A quiet act of approval. No clapping, no applause, just full mouths and soft murmurs. This is what early food culture feels like. Shared moments around fire, failed experiments and surprise wins, flavour rising from ash, the birth of preference. The charcoal crust crackles between your teeth. The fire warms your face, and you think, not for the first time I could eat this again. You've eaten charcoal-crusted mushrooms for days now, and while your taste buds are grateful for the variety, Your jaw is tired of crunching. Tonight, someone proposes something different pit cooking. It sounds fancy, but really, it's just what happens when you run out of good flat stones and start improvising with holes in the ground. You watch as two of your group use blunt sticks and their hands to scrape out a shallow pit near the fire's edge. The earth is soft here, damp from the rain earlier this week, perfect for holding heat, or so the theory goes. Nobody's entirely sure, but the plan sounds impressive enough to try. Into the pit go hot stones collected from the river, carried here one at a time, each still warm from sitting beside the coals. Then come layers first, a sprinkle of sand and ash, then bark strips, then the mushrooms. The caps are larger this time, thick-fleshed and meaty-looking, the kind that promise a meal even if the flavour disappoints. Someone tosses in a few leaves for good measure, aromatic maybe, or maybe just a desperate attempt at variety. Finally, the pit is covered more bark, then dirt, then a few extra stones on top to weigh it all down, and then you wait. Pit cooking is the ultimate test of patience in a world without clocks. You sit by the fire, watching smoke curl from the mound, listening to the occasional hiss of sap or steam escaping. The air smells earthy, smoky, faintly sweet. Historians still argue whether early pit cooking was intentional culinary technique or just a way to keep food safe from scavengers while it cooked. Maybe both. Maybe someone accidentally buried a meal once and found it hours later, perfectly tender and infused with flavour. Maybe tonight's the night you stumble onto that same happy discovery. The waiting stretches on. The sky darkens. Someone pokes the mound with a stick, then shrugs. No one really knows when it's done. There's no recipe here, just instinct and hunger. After what feels like forever, the group agrees it's time. The dirt is scraped away, the bark peeled back, steam pours out, rich and fragrant, carrying the scent of mushrooms softened by heat and time. You lean closer, nose twitching. The caps glisten, their edges curled, their centres sunken just slightly where the juices pooled and thickened. You reach for one, fingers burning slightly as you lift it free. The flesh yields easily. You take a bite. It's soft, really soft, almost too soft. The flavour mild, earthy, with a faint sweetness from the bark. But the texture is questionable, mushy, a bit slimy in parts, like overcooked roots or boiled moss. You chew thoughtfully, swallow, and decide it's acceptable. Not exciting, but filling. Someone else tries theirs, makes a face, not from poison, thankfully just disappointment. The mushrooms cook too long. What you'd hoped would be tender turned into near mush, edible mush, but mush all the same. You all eat anyway. Hunger is the ultimate seasoning. Here's a quirky tidbit: some modern hunter-gatherer cultures still use pit cooking today, not just for meat, but for roots, tubers, and yes, mushrooms. The technique softens tough foods, making them easier to digest. Even if the results aren't always delicious, they're nourishing. And in your world, that's what counts. The meal winds down. People pick at the remains, scraping bits of mushroom from bark, licking fingers, wiping ash on their furs. Someone quietly buries a particularly mushy cap rather than eat it. You pretend not to notice. That's the polite thing to do. And yet, despite the flaws, pit cooking has potential. You see it in the way people talk after the meal, not with words but with gestures, pointing at the pit, mimicking the layering, suggesting improvements. Maybe next time, the stone should be hotter, maybe fewer leaves, maybe a thinner layer of bark. This is how cooking evolves small failures, small victories, and shared memory. The fire crackles softly as the night deepens. Someone tosses another log on, sending sparks into the dark. You lean back, belly full, not satisfied exactly, but no longer empty, and that's enough for tonight. You close your eyes, the taste of soft mushroom still lingering on your tongue. The air is cool, the earth beneath you warm from the pit, and as you drift toward sleep, you think about tomorrow, about trying again, about perfecting the balance of heat, time, and fire, about chasing that perfect mushroom roast that always feels just one meal away. Because this is the Stone Age, and food isn't just survival, it's discovery, and you're right in the middle of it. You're crouched beside the fire again, stirring yesterday's pit with a stick. The leftover mushroom sludge still smells edible, but no one's rushing to repeat that particular culinary adventure. Everyone agreed pit cooking needs work. Someone behind you mutters something low and tense. You turn. It's the old one, the one who swears the mushrooms used in last night's meal were cursed. You sigh. Here we go again. Tonight, superstition is on the menu. See, a few people had strange dreams after the mushy feast. One woke up convinced their toes had swapped places. Another claimed the stars had whispered insults. Even though everyone's breathing, walking, and mostly normal, that's enough to raise eyebrows and ancient alarm bells. You know how this works. When something weird happens, and no one can explain it, the blame falls on food, or spirits, or both. A small group is already gathered in the clearing, whispering and gesturing toward the mushrooms drying by the bark racks. Those, apparently, are the ones that cause the dreams, even though, let's be honest, it was probably just the pit cooking and someone not chewing properly. But facts don't stop fear. A makeshift ritual starts. Just a circle of people pointing at the suspicious mushrooms and muttering vaguely threatening things to the air. Someone waves smoke over them. Someone else throws in a few twigs shaped like a star. The old one hums. You try not to roll your eyes, but this isn't new. Mushrooms have always walked the tightrope between meal and mystery. Historians still argue whether early humans developed food taboos from genuine health risks or post-meal hallucinations. Probably both. All it takes is one wild night, one stomachache, or one person deciding a mushroom looked too ghost-coloured, and suddenly it's forbidden. Tonight, the bad mushrooms are isolated. No one's throwing them out. Wasting food is still a crime against hunger, but they're moved to the edge of the camp, left under a rock, just far enough away that everyone feels safer. You poke one with your stick, still soft, still smells like mushroom, but now it's tainted, not by poison, necessarily, but by fear. The group mutters about the mushroom gods, those invisible spirits who supposedly live in the shadows of the forest, punishing those who cook wrong, eat wrong, or disrespect the sacred balance of wood and fire. You're not sure you believe any of it, but when you sit by the fire later, you find yourself checking your breath, listening to your stomach, just in case. Quirky tidbit of the night, there's archaeological evidence of certain foods being ritually banished in pre-agricultural societies. Piles of clearly edible plants and fungi deliberately buried or left far from living spaces, possibly out of fear, reverence, or to avoid bad luck. It makes sense. When you live this close to nature, everything is personal. The wind, the rain, the mushrooms, they're all part of a delicate balance. And when something breaks that balance, it must be explained. So now the conversation shifts. Was it the mushrooms, the fire, the shape of the cooking pit, the full moon? Someone suggests the bark was from the wrong tree, too dry. They grunt. Another insists the problem was where the mushrooms were picked, the East Grove, they say with a shiver. Apparently, nothing good grows there. You sip some water boiled recently, thank goodness, and listen. The storytelling begins. One person recalls the time their aunt saw a glowing cap near a swamp and touched it, and then forgot her own name for 3 days. Another swears they once saw a mushroom move when no wind blew. You know what this is? Communal stress relief, the Stone Age version of group therapy, but also a warning. Because while you can mock the drama, you've also seen what happens when someone eats the wrong cap. Their eyes go wide, their body shakes. Sometimes they don't wake up, so maybe the mushroom gods aren't real, but the fear, very real, and sometimes just enough to keep you safe. Tonight, nobody's cooking mushrooms. Instead, a few roots are roasted over the fire, boring, bland, reliable. You eat them anyway. You chew. You miss the smoky char, the bark crust, the weird bitterness that made your mouth feel awake. But you also like knowing you won't see stars laughing at you later. You lie back on a bed of dry grass and watch the sky. The stars blink. The fire crackles. The suspect mushrooms sit quietly beneath their rock, banished but not forgotten. You wonder how long they'll stay there. You wonder who will be brave enough to try them again, because this is how food legends are born. One bite too far, one dream too vivid, and suddenly a cap becomes a curse. And maybe, deep down, that's why mushrooms have always fascinated your kind. They grow from rot. They don't move. They don't chase. But they do something. They hold power. And power, especially the edible kind, is always scary. You curl into your fur and close your eyes. No mushroom tonight. Just firelight, cold toes, and 100 unanswered questions. The morning after the curse mushrooms were buried under a rock. Everyone's being a little too polite, too quiet. The kind of silence that says we all had weird dreams again, but no one wants to admit it. You stretch your legs and blink toward the edge of camp, where a few folks are already poking cautiously at yesterday's fire pit. One of them is humming again, that same strange little tune. You're pretty sure he didn't know it before eating those mushrooms. You yawn. Your stomach's fine. No spirit visitations. No cold sweats. But someone's daughter spent the night talking to the sky. In full sentences, apparently. And she's 4. That's enough for the elders to nod gravely and say, "The gods are still displeased?" You rub your temples. This again. Today. No one's foraging mushrooms. Not even the brave ones. The entire group switched back to digging for roots and chasing lizards. Anything that can't sprout spores or whisper in your dreams is the safer bet. The suspect mushrooms remain untouched under their rock. Someone's drawn a ring of burnt sticks around them, just to be sure. You help dig for tubers for a while. It's fine. It's dull. But your belly stays quiet, and nobody starts muttering in ancient languages. Still, by mid-afternoon, a few folks gather around the fire and start whispering about what really happened. There's talk of someone using bad wood. Others suspect the mushrooms were picked too close to the river, where the mist pulls the spirits into them. One person blames the dream messages on the moon being too fat. You consider suggesting that maybe it was just bad cooking, but decide against it. Nobody wants logic when spirits are involved. Historians still argue whether early humans truly believed in food-based spirits, or simply used those stories as a way to explain the unexplainable. The line between weird meal and divine punishment was thin, especially when half your dinners made you hallucinate or want to fight trees. You head back toward the fire and notice something odd. One of the older women is chewing something, slowly, thoughtfully. You watch her reach into a pouch and pull out, a dried mushroom. Not the mushrooms from under the rock, a different one. One of the ordinary brown ones. She toasts it briefly, then eats another piece. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Safe, she says simply. Other mushrooms, not spirit ones. You exhale in relief. Not everyone's lost to superstition today. But this moment brings a new idea. You walk to the drying rack and inspect what remains. A few shriveled caps, some tough stems, all dried hard from last week's sun. You pick one up and sniff. It smells bland, faintly nutty, a little dusty, but not bad. You chew a corner. It crunches faintly, like old bark. You keep chewing. Not delicious, not fresh, but safe. And safe is gold these days. That's when someone else notices you eating. They wander over. Point at the dried cap. You nod. They ask gesturally if you feel strange. You shake your head. They try one too. Soon there's a small circle again, but this time, no one's roasting anything. You're all just chewing on dried mushrooms. Slowly, thoughtfully, like monks with old chewing gum. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some anthropologists believe early humans learned to preserve food like mushrooms by pure necessity and trial. Leftover caps forgotten on a warm stone or by a fire may have dried naturally. Those that didn't spoil or sicken anyone. Suddenly, you had food that could travel, or wait, or be stockpiled for harder days. Dried mushrooms don't taste like much, but they don't rot quickly, and they don't talk to you in your sleep. Someone slices a piece with a stone flake and tries to mash it into a powder. It's a mess, but then they sprinkle the bits onto a root they're roasting. You watch closely. When they eat it, they grunt approvingly. Now that is new. You try it too. The dried mushroom bits don't melt or mix, but they do add something. A faint meatiness, a hint of yesterday's fire, enough to notice, not enough to scare anyone. No one's dancing, no one's vomiting, no one's drawing spirals in the dirt while whispering to invisible stars. Progress. You still feel the weight of last night. The superstition isn't gone. The spirit mushrooms still sit in exile under their stick ring, watched by the wary and avoided by everyone else. But the rest, the normal mushrooms. You're learning how to make them last. It's a quiet shift, but a real one. Because this is what survival looks like, not just eating the safe thing once, but finding ways to keep eating it, to make it stretch, to store it, share it, change it. The fire burns low as the sun dips. A few people settle down nearby, slowly chewing their dried slices, softer now from a bit of water and patience. No one complains. No one dreams out loud. You stare into the embers, feeling full enough, safe enough. You glance toward the rock where the cursed caps still hide. Tomorrow, someone will decide whether to throw them deeper into the woods or try again. But tonight you chew, you breathe, and you sleep dreamlessly. Dawn creeps in through the trees, golden and damp, as mist lingers just above the forest floor. You rise slowly, rubbing grit from your eyes and brushing off bark bits that somehow became your pillow. The fire's gone cold. The others are still asleep, most of them, anyway. You spot a movement near the edge of camp, a small figure bare feet, quick steps slipping into the trees, a child. You blink. That's not good. You rise and follow, careful not to snap twigs underfoot. You're not worried about the kid getting lost. You're worried about what they might find. And sure enough, you spot her crouched near a rock, poking at something with a stick. You inch closer. She's staring at mushrooms, the kind with bright caps and strange speckles. Not from camp, not familiar. You hold your breath. She glances up, sees you, smiles wide, and before you can stop her, she picks one up and licks it. You freeze. She doesn't swallow, just giggles, like she's testing a popsicle. You scoop her up fast, heart pounding, and brush her tongue with your sleeve. She laughs harder, not understanding your panic. To her, it was just something shiny, curious, like a rock with flavour. You carry her back to camp, watching closely. 5 minutes pass, then 10. No shaking, no howling. She just wants breakfast. You sigh. Later, you tell the elders. They frown, shake their heads, and mumble about children having no fear of spirits. Someone ties a cord around the licked mushroom and hangs it from a stick. It becomes an example, a warning. That's how cautionary tales are born. Historians still argue whether early taboos around mushrooms originated from ritual or necessity, but incidents like this, they're probably both. A single slip, one toddler tongue, and suddenly that entire mushroom species is dubbed child burner or tongue stealer. That's enough to keep people cautious for generations. You spend the rest of the day shadowing the little ones as they wander near the edges of camp. They don't try to cause chaos, they're just new. Everything is edible until proven otherwise. If it fits in a hand, it might fit in a mouth. Berries, bark, bugs, mushrooms. One kid holds up a mushroom cap like it's a prize. It's black with golden dots. You snatch it away and throw it into the fire. She cries. You explain, gesturing, scowling, trying to make it stick. You point to her belly, then mime exploding. She stops crying. Maybe it worked. Still, you gather the other adults and suggest a new plan, a teaching circle. Every evening before dinner, you gather the children and show them examples. This one's safe. This one maybe. This one absolutely not. It's a system built on repetition and fear. But hey, it's effective. You even start using nicknames for certain mushrooms. Sleeper, stomach burn, skywatcher. You have no written language, yeah, but spoken shorthand is evolving. A kind of taxonomy, made of survival and half-remembered stomachaches. Quirky tidbit, many modern folk names for mushrooms like destroying angel, or witch's butter, may have roots in these ancient oral traditions. Descriptions passed down not for scientific precision, but as warnings, edibility boiled down to drama. And kids, they remember drama. By nightfall, you're exhausted. Mushroom babysitting is no joke, but something's shifted. The group seems more focused now, protective. You even see one of the older children swat a sibling's hand away from a suspicious cap without being told. Progress. You reward the little ones with roasted roots and a few safe, chewy mushroom caps from the drying rack. Their faces scrunch at the texture, but they eat anyway. Familiarity grows from repetition. Later, someone sings a lullaby, one you've heard before, but now it includes a verse about the shiny cap that makes your tongue dance away. It's ridiculous. It rhymes poorly, but the kids listen, and they remember. You smile. Because this, too, is survival, not just knowing what you shouldn't eat, but teaching the ones who come after. Making food memory into group memory. The fire burns low. The child who licked the mushroom sleeps soundly nearby. Curled against her mother, her breath is slow, peaceful. You watch her chest rise and fall. You think about how fragile she is, and how strong your people have become through rituals, mistakes, stories, and one too many gut-wrenching taste tests. You close your eyes and whisper to yourself, no glowing mushrooms tomorrow. The sun breaks through the canopy with a soft warmth that makes the camp seem almost peaceful. The birds are louder today. The leaves smell greener. And for a moment you forget just how many mushrooms nearly killed someone this week. You stretch your arms and glance toward the cooking area where someone is poking curiously at a soggy, squishy mess near the logs. You approach. It's not animal, not recent, and definitely not planted. It's fermenting mushrooms. A pile of them, half forgotten in a shaded crevice behind the food mat, left damp for days. They've collapsed into a glistening mound of funk. The smell hits you first, sharp, sour, vaguely sweet, like tree sap that went sour after partying too hard with a dead raccoon. You step back. Someone else wanders over and wrinkles their nose. Spoiled, they grunt. You nod. But then, because this is how terrible ideas happen, someone else leans in and sniffs again. Their face shifts. Not horror, not disgust, just curiosity. They poke it, then, unbelievably, taste it. You shout, or grunt, or whatever noise counts as a prehistoric. Are you out of your mind? But they chew, they swallow, and then wait for it. They smile. It's tentative, it's suspicious, but it's a smile. Historians still argue whether fermentation was discovered by accident or desperation. Most likely both. Someone somewhere left food in a damp spot, forgot about it, and came back to find a bubbling mass that smelled awful but did not kill them. Then someone else copied them. You stare at your friend. He's now licking his fingers. He tears off a piece of bark, scrapes up a little of the mushroom sludge, and passes it to you. You hesitate. Everything in your body says no, but everything in your brain whispers, what if this is the next big thing? You try it. It's sharp, tangy, almost fizzy. It burns a little going down. You cough, then blink, then nod. This shouldn't be food. But somehow, it is. Quirky tidbit in some modern traditional societies. Mushrooms are intentionally fermented as part of preservation. While rare, it suggests a deep-rooted relationship between human guts and controlled rot. Back at the fire, others are starting to gather. The smell has reached the edge of the camp. Not inviting, but intriguing. One by one, people approach. Sniff, frown, step back, then step forward again. The brave few try a taste. Some gag, some chew slowly. One person actually moans with delight. That's probably an exaggeration, but no one questions it. Soon, someone adds a handful of the fermented mass to a batch of hot mushrooms roasting over the fire. You watch. This is reckless. Beautifully reckless, but as it sizzles and mixes, the smell changes, less sharp, more mellow, still pungent, but now with depth. You taste the result. Your eyebrows go up. It's earthy, savoury, salty somehow, like it remembered being alive but got over it. It's good. You blink again. This should not work, but it does. Suddenly everyone is talking softly, excitedly, grunting opinions, making plans. Someone starts gathering more mushrooms to leave in a hollow log. Let it rot, they say. Just a little. A new word joins the growing food vocabulary, wait mushroom. Or slow mushroom. Or something close to that. The idea sticks. You've discovered Stone Age fermentation. By mistake. By boldness, by being too hungry to respect common sense. Now comes the problem, the regret. By sunset, 2 people are hunched over, groaning. One is vomiting quietly behind a tree. You feel fine, but a creeping worry sneaks into your gut. Was it just this batch that worked? Was the log behind the fire a lucky accident? Or did you just eat the first bite of what will become an extended bathroom break with no bathroom? You try not to panic, but you do lay down early, just in case. The group agrees more experiments are needed. Carefully, 1 handful at a time. Maybe dry the mushrooms a little first. Maybe bury them shallower. Maybe only eat them with fire-cooked food. There's hope. There's fear. There's someone whimpering in the background. But no deaths. Not yet. This is how prehistoric people learned the hard way that fermentation walks a knife's edge. A few hours too long, a little too much moisture, and your miracle turns into a mistake. But the idea is now alive. Mushrooms can change on their own over time and still be food. You fall asleep with your hands folded over your belly, just in case. Listening to the fire pop, smelling faint traces of that funky pile behind the logs. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll check on it. Maybe, but not before sunrise. The pile behind the log is still there. You check it in the morning, cautiously, like you're greeting a wild animal you might want to tame or bury. The fermented mushroom mash hasn't changed much. Maybe darker, maybe stickier. The smell is still potent, rich and vinegary, like old sap mixed with wet fur. But you survived yesterday's taste, so you crouch and stare, considering your next move. You're not alone. 2 others from camp wander over. They nod at the pile like it's an old enemy you've agreed to tolerate. One of them offers a bark cup. He's mashed a few pieces of the funky mushroom with water, creating what he proudly announces as drink mushroom. You do not sip first. He does. He swallows. Waits. No foaming. No fainting. He nods. Better cold. He says, "That's a bold claim." You try a sip. It's awful. Like sour broth left in a tree trunk for 6 days. But it doesn't kill you. So by Stone Age standards, it's a beverage. Congratulations. You've accidentally invented a disgusting but functional mushroom tonic. Still, this fermented business is hard to scale. Not every pile of mushrooms rots the right way. Some turn blue, some grow fuzz. One batch smells like burnt ant nest. You bury that one without discussion. That's when you hear it voices. Not yours, not your tribe's. You straighten. Look toward the trees. Outsiders. They appear slowly. 3 of them. Skin dark with sun. Furs unfamiliar. Hands empty but eyes alert. They nod once, cautiously, and hold up a bundle, a string of small, strange mushrooms. Pale pink and knotted like twine. They're offering a trade. Your group gathers. The silent negotiation begins. First, you offer what you know, a handful of bark-charred caps, then undried mushroom, then, with great hesitation, a dollop of the fermented goop. The visitors sniff it. One tastes. He smiles. Then he hands over a small pouch-woven bark, tied with sinew. Inside more mushrooms, tiny, wrinkled, dried already. A smell like smoke and cinnamon. You trade, carefully. 2 bark stone roasted caps for the pouch. 1 dried mushroom for a laughably small pink one. A lick of fermented paste for a respectful grunt. The great mushroom exchange has begun. Historians still argue whether trade networks existed this early, but there's growing evidence that even Paleolithic groups shared goods, foods, and ideas over distance. And here you are, witnessing it firsthand, in the form of mouldy mushrooms and meaningful grunts. Your new mushrooms are unfamiliar. You don't cook them immediately. First, you sniff them, crush one, roll a slice on your tongue without swallowing, wait. Later that day, you risk roasting two. The fire sizzles as the pinkish caps darken. The smell is rich, unlike anything from your usual foraging spots. Someone nearby says it smells like meat. Another says it smells like rain. You eat the first bite. It's soft, silky, almost sweet. You pause. The second bite is better. Others eat, carefully, slowly. There's silence for a moment, then small, pleased sounds, nod after nod. You've just discovered a new favourite. Then someone stands up, walks to the fire, and points to the pouch. He holds it up high and says something simple but important. A new word, a sound that clearly means this one's special. And it sticks. Just like that. This mushroom joins your food memory. Later that evening, the visitors try one of your recipes, roasting a familiar cap on pine bark, drizzling it with rabbit fat, and scraping on a pinch of dried fermented mushroom. They grunt with approval. You smile. They share one more thing before they leave a soft, rolled leaf with black ash marks on the inside drawings. Not of mushrooms, but of how they cook them. A mushroom beside a fire, another sliced thin on bark, one dropped into water in a stone bowl. You examine it like a sacred map. It's crude, but it's knowledge. Your people gather around the drawing. You mimic the shapes, recreate the cooking techniques. One involves wrapping mushrooms in leaves and placing them under hot stones. Another suggests boiling, which you'll have to figure out later when someone invents a proper container. Still, you've gained something priceless. New mushrooms, new cooking methods, and proof that you're not alone in this weird, mouldy journey. Quirky tidbit early long-distance trade wasn't just tools and ornaments. It likely included foodstuffs and techniques. Knowledge travelled with the people, and fungi, being plentiful and regional, would have varied wildly between groups. Tonight, as you lie beside the fire, pouch of traded mushrooms tucked beside your furs, you feel something you don't usually associate with a Stone Age connection. You wonder who they'll share your fermented mushroom paste with, whether they'll keep it alive, whether they'll laugh or cry the first time someone eats too much and sees the moon blink. But for now, you close your eyes, belly full, mind buzzing, mushrooms exchanged, and curiosity fed. The traded mushrooms are still on your mind when the rain starts. It begins with a soft whisper on the leaves, then escalates into a full chorus of drips and thuds. Your drying mats are soaked within minutes. The fire sputters. The smoke thickens. And just like that, everything you thought you'd stored for the future turns into a soggy disaster. You rush to the bark rack, hoping to salvage something. Too late. The mushrooms you dried all week, they've gone soft again. Some are turning weird colours. One smells like wet hide left too close to a dung pile. You prod it with a stick. It collapses in on itself. You've just discovered another lesson in Stone Age preservation. Moisture ruins everything. Your stomach sinks. Those mushrooms were your backup plan. Food for the days when foraging was slim, and now they're a cautionary tale. You call out grunts and gestures summoning the others. The group gathers around the racks with long faces and wet hair. One person tries to salvage a cap by wiping it with grass. It does not help. You dig a shallow hole and bury the worst ones. No sense in letting someone try to eat them out of desperation later. Historians believe food preservation began with nothing more than common sense and accidents. Dry something, leave it near smoke, realize it lasts longer. But also, forget to move it when the weather turns, and suddenly you've created a science project from hell. You sigh and kick a rock, back to foraging. The ground is slippery now, the moss saturated. You and two others fan out, sticking close to known patches. But the mushrooms you find today are waterlogged slimy, sagging under their own weight. One looks like it melted. You poke it, and it wheezes. Definitely not food. You return with only a few decent caps. The ones that survived the storm clung to vertical bark, just above the splash line. You hold them carefully, treating them like fragile eggs. This is all you've got. Back at camp, someone's building a new rack raised higher, with sharper angles, made to keep water off. A tarp of leaves and fur hangs above it. It's ugly, lumpy, but functional, and it just might save your next batch. You add your mushrooms to a corner of the rack and sit nearby, feeding the fire with dry sticks you kept under your sleeping furs. Someone else tends to the new smoke tunnel, a small covered ditch of hot coals and bark that channels heat toward the drying caps. It's the closest thing you've ever seen to a proper oven, and it works. Over the next hour, the mushrooms begin to dry not perfectly, but enough to stop them from turning into slime. You flip them carefully. You watch the way the moisture beads and vanishes. You smile, just a little. This is progress. Quirky fact in some prehistoric caves. Scientists have found clusters of dried plant material suggesting that smoke drying wasn't just for meat, but also fungi and herbs. Not because anyone understood bacteria, but because they noticed which food lasted and which turned into disasters. You chew a half-dried cap, testing the flavour. Still rubbery, still bland, but not rotten. And that's what counts. Later, as the rain slows and the sun peeks through, someone finds a few mushrooms hidden in a hollow tree trunk, perfectly dry, protected by nature's pantry. You make a mental note, always check tree holes after rain. Another new habit. The group eats carefully tonight. Mostly roots, a little meat, a few dryish mushrooms that haven't started fermenting themselves. One of the elders, missing a few teeth but full of opinions, starts mumbling about the curse of the rain gods. You don't argue. Everyone needs someone to blame. But even she nods in approval at the raised rack, because now you're doing something rare, preparing for trouble before it hits. You sit by the fire after dinner, watching the smoke curl toward your mushrooms. You've placed a few of the traded caps on the new rack too. No one argues, no one touches them. Not after last night's feast. Those pink ones, they've become something sacred. Maybe you'll save them for a feast day, or invent a feast day just to justify eating them again. You lie down, head near the warmth of the fire. The ground is still damp, but your spirits aren't. You feel, for once, ahead of the weather, ahead of the rot, ahead of the creeping threat of hunger. The rack creaks softly in the wind, a piece of bark falls, and somewhere in the dark, you smile at the thought that you're not just surviving anymore, you're adapting. And if your ancestors ever build kitchens and write cookbooks, it'll all start here with a log, a cap, a storm, and the stubborn belief that mushrooms can be tamed. The next morning begins with the surprise ants, a long line of them, weaving through the damp grass and up the side of a tree, straight toward a patch of mushrooms you hadn't noticed before. You squint at the little fungi, no bigger than a toe, clustered like gossip at the base of the trunk. You wouldn't have looked twice, but the ants, they're feasting. You kneel beside them, careful not to spook the line. The ants are ignoring everything else, skipping leaves, dead bark, even a crushed beetle nearby to zero in on these mushrooms. You watch, fascinated, as they slice away slivers and carry them off like treasure. You glance over your shoulder. No one else is watching. So you do what any logical forager in the Stone Age might do when unsure about a new food. Let the ants decide. Quirky tidbit: some modern researchers believe early humans observed animal behaviour, especially insects and birds, to learn what was safe to eat. If it didn't kill a squirrel or an ant, it might not kill you either. Not guaranteed, of course. But when you're one bad bite away from intestinal betrayal, you'll take any clue. You pick one mushroom gently. Sniff it. Smells faintly nutty, like the inside of a tree. No slime, no strange colours, just soft white flesh under a delicate brown cap. Still, you wait. You break a piece. Place it near the fire. Let it sit. Watch. Nothing dramatic happens. The piece just blackens gently, curls a little, then releases a mild, earthy smell. You roast another sliver. Chew slowly. Chew again. It's good. Not spectacular, but warm, soft, and easy on the stomach. Within an hour, you're still alive. Within 2, you feel fine. You return to the tree. The ants are gone now, having stripped the mushrooms clean. But you remember the smell, the texture, the shape. You begin scanning other trees for the same pattern. Soon, you find a second patch. This time, you call the others. And that's how you end up leading a small group on a new kind of hunt, not for meat or bark, but for fungi that the ants liked first. By midday, you've gathered a decent haul. The pile sits beside the fire, soft and slightly damp. Each cap checked and double-checked. Someone suggests roasting them with bark from the tree they grew near. To keep the spirit flavour, they say. You nod, because sure, why not? You cook the new batch slowly. They darken at the edges. The scent richer than usual, a kind of savoury warmth. When you pass them around, everyone eats cautiously at first. Then with more confidence, you smile. This, you realise, is a breakthrough. Not just because the mushrooms taste good, but because now you have a new tool: observation. You're not just guessing anymore. You're watching how nature reacts, who eats what lives, what dies. It's subtle, but powerful. One child begins trailing ants on purpose now. She crouches low, tiny hands resting on her knees, eyes following the lines with quiet focus. She calls you over when she spots another ant party at the base of a sun-bleached log. You mark the spot with a rock. You'll return later. Historians still argue how much of ancient food knowledge came from copying animals, but the more you live this life, the more obvious it becomes. Sometimes survival means watching squirrels more than each other. You start developing rules, unspoken ones, just eye glances and gestures for now. Ants eat it. Probably safe. No bugs. Maybe not worth the risk. Bright colours. Only if you're desperate or ready to see music. By nightfall, someone's built a new ant map with rocks near the drying rack. A circle here means safe. A crossed stick means wait and see. It's crude, but everyone nods like it makes sense, because it does. You eat your evening mushroom slow, roasting it in a folded bark cup over embers. The cap turns soft and glossy. You chew, it's nutty, almost sweet, and you realise something else. This mushroom, the ant's favourite, has no slime, no thick gills, no suspicious spots. It's smooth, even consistent. And now it's familiar. That's how it starts, one ant. One log, one bite, then repetition, then trust, then a new staple. You lie back against the dirt, belly full enough, head near the fire. Someone's humming again. Not a spirit song this time, just a sleepy tune about the little things that carry food and never lie. You laugh softly, because it's true. You owe dinner to a trail of ants, and tomorrow you'll follow them again. The next morning, you wake to the soft crackle of pine needles under someone's feet. You sit up slowly, rubbing the sleep from your eyes and sniffing the air. There it is, that crisp, sharp scent of resin, smoke, and something just starting to roast. You follow the smell and find a young gatherer near the fire, crouched over a neat little arrangement of pine needles layered like a makeshift cooking mat. On top of the green bed, mushrooms flat, wide caps, carefully spaced like jewels in the forest's weirdest recipe. He glances up, proud. You squint at the setup. No bark, no stones, just mushrooms sizzling gently on a stack of pine needles. You almost say something, but he lifts one carefully and shows you the underside. It's lightly browned, the pine needles singed but not burned. The cap's soft, almost buttery. He offers it. You take a bite, and something strange happens. It doesn't taste like mushroom, not fully. There's a brightness to it, a sharpness you can't quite place. It's earthy, sheer but also fresh, tangy, and just behind it, a whisper of pine smoke. Not bitterness, but aroma, like chewing a memory of walking through the woods barefoot at dusk. You nod slowly, then faster. This is new, and you like it. He grins and makes room for you by the fire. You find a few more pine needles, lay them out in a crosshatch pattern, and place your own caps on top. It's a delicate balance, too close to the flame and they scorch, too far and nothing happens. But you learn. Fast. The pine burns just enough to release its resin, which seeps into the mushrooms as they roast. It's subtle, but suddenly, the fungi don't just taste like themselves anymore. They taste like the forest. Quirky tidbit. Some food historians believe early human cooking surfaces were made not from stone or metal, but from plant materials, pine needles, large leaves, flat bark, especially when flavour mattered less than convenience. But in doing so, they may have unintentionally added layers of taste we now seek with purpose. You roast a second cap, then a third. Soon, others notice. This scent travels fast, smoky, piney, savoury. One by one, people drift toward the fire, sniffing and watching. You explain the method, slowly, mostly with gestures. The pine must be dry but not brittle. The needles must lay flat, not bunched. You must move the mushrooms gently so they don't roll into the coals. It becomes a dance. You roast, flip, share. One person tries it with dry moss. Bad idea. It smokes like regret and smells like burned hair. You wave that experiment away quickly. But the pine, it's perfect. Even the little ones want in. Someone starts stacking needles like a child's game, learning which ones bend and which ones snap. It becomes play, and then learning, and then cooking. The mushrooms themselves are nothing special, just your basic daily cap. But now they have personality. They taste like fire and air and the trees that surround you. And that changes everything. Tonight, for the first time, someone gives thanks before eating. Not to a god, not exactly, but to the pine tree. They pat its bark and say, "Good tree." Everyone nods. It's not a joke, because in a world without spice racks or marinades, the forest is your seasoning. You just have to listen to it. Historians still debate whether early humans experimented with cooking surfaces intentionally for flavour or just for practicality. But flavour leaves memory, and memory builds tradition. You're watching it happen. The pine needle method catches on. Tomorrow, someone suggests using fir tips. Another points at dried fern fronds. A third proposes wrapping mushrooms in leaves before setting them near coals like a pouch. She says, "You blink. That's practically a casserole. You eat until your fingers smell like smoke and sap. Your mouth tingles faintly not from poison, but from the slight acidity of roasted resin. You like it. A lot. By nightfall." The pine tree near camp is half stripped of lower branches. A new sound joins the usual evening hum of insects and low chatter, the soft crackle of needles burning beneath mushrooms. You lie beside the fire, the last bite still warm in your mouth, the scent clinging to your fur. You feel full, not just in your belly, but in your head, in your story. Because now your mushrooms taste like place, like memory, like pine. And that's something worth roasting again. You never thought you'd hear someone say the words, "Try it on a stick," with such confidence. But here you are. A half-charred twig is being held triumphantly over the fire by a particularly ambitious hunter who, having failed to catch a squirrel today, is determined to contribute to dinner anyway. And what's skewered on the stick? 3 mushrooms, lined up like prehistoric marshmallows, slowly rotating over the flame. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. "Welcome to spit-roasted spores and other odd ideas. It doesn't look promising." The mushrooms are sliding a little, their skins wrinkling, caps sagging. The stick itself is smoking. One cap droops dramatically and falls into the fire with a hiss. He doesn't blink, just adds another to the line and keeps turning. You admire the commitment. You try it too. Your stick's thicker, maybe less flammable. You thread 2 small caps onto it, careful to space them out. You hold them over the flame knot in it. Slowly, gently, they darken, they bubble, and then they shrivel. You take a bite of one when it's done. It's okay, drier than expected, a bit smoky, slightly rubbery. You chew and nod. Not great, not terrible, but at least it's hot. The group watches your experiment. One person says the stick method looks like play. Another shrugs and tries it anyway. Soon there are half a dozen people rotating mushrooms over the fire like they've just invented the concept of fun with food. Some use straight sticks. Others bend theirs into hooks or prongs. Someone tries weaving tiny twigs into a grid and lays the mushrooms on top like a rack. It breaks immediately, but still, the idea is out there now. Quirky fact while there's little direct evidence of Paleolithic mushroom kebabs. Similar food prep styles were used for small animals, fish, and roots. It's likely someone at some point held a stick of something over a flame and called it dinner. Still, the mushroom spit method has its issues. For one, the caps don't always stay on. They split, crack, dribble juices into the fire, and sometimes hiss so loudly you think they're angry. One mushroom pops and sends a fleck of hot sap onto someone's leg. They howl and leap up, smack in the spot. No serious injuries, just pride. Then there's the taste. Fire roasting on a stick dries the mushrooms fast. Too fast. The inside stays chewy, sometimes even raw. The outside chars. You're essentially eating something that feels like burned leather hiding a damp sponge. But still, you keep trying. Because it's interactive. It's communal. It gives you something to do with your hands while waiting for night to fall, for food to cook, for the stars to show up and the cold to creep in. Even the kids try it. They line up tiny caps on sticks, too close to the fire, burning them into sad mushroom ghosts. But they laugh. They pretend the mushrooms are warriors marching into battle. You chuckle as one dramatic child eats a completely blackened cap and pretends to faint. Someone jokes that if you hold the mushroom just right, it starts to look like an eyeball. That ends tonight's mushroom roasting for at least 3 people. Still, there's something to it. Roasting on sticks teaches you how to control heat. You learn distance, rotation, timing. You notice which caps crack and which melt. You begin to suspect which ones are fire mushrooms and which are stone mushrooms. Different textures, different reactions. Historians would later recognize these subtle differences as the roots of food taxonomy. But for now, you just say, this one stays soft, or that one goes crunch. Someone accidentally dips a roasted cap in cold water and then eats it. You expect gagging. Instead, they blink. It's better. They mumble, and you all try it. Mushrooms roasted dry, then cooled in water. The skin tightens. The inside softens. It works. The combination of heat and moisture makes the texture smoother, less rubbery. You repeat the process. Now you're not just cooking, you're treating the food. Later, one of the elders tries brushing ash onto a mushroom before roasting it. The ash sticks. It burns into a thin crust. When scraped off, the flavour changes deeper, smokier. Someone calls it fire skin. You laugh. The name stays, and just like that, your weird stick roasting experiment turns into a miniature cooking school. No lectures, no lessons. Just trial, error, mouthfuls, and surprised grunts of approval. The mushrooms on sticks aren't your best dish, but they're a step forward, toward better fire control, toward understanding texture, toward learning what burns fast and what needs slow care. And maybe most importantly, they make the fire feel like a gathering again, not just a tool, but a place. A centre. You lie back beside the embers, watching others take your spot, spinning mushrooms slowly over dancing flames. Dinner's done, but the experiments, they're just getting started. The wind cuts sharp through the camp this morning, cold enough to make your fingers ache. The fire barely catches, huddling low in its ash cradle like a shivering animal. You don't want to forage. You don't want to cook. You just want to stay close to warmth and pretend your stomach isn't making desperate negotiation sounds. But the mushrooms are calling. Well, not literally. That would mean you've eaten the wrong kind again. But they're out there, somewhere under frost-bitten leaves and between roots that haven't yet frozen solid. You trudge out, shoulders hunched, breath curling in the air. You're not alone. A few others scatter silently into the woods, searching for anything that looks edible. You don't expect much. This isn't mushroom season, not really. The ground's too cold, the air too dry. Even the ants have disappeared. Still, you kneel under an old tree, scrape away the leaf layer and blink in surprise. A cluster, small, pale, thin stems, delicate caps folded in tight. You sniff. They smell fresh. No slime, no mould, but they're raw, completely. And you're too cold to start a fire right now, so you stare at them and you think, what if? You pluck one, you bite, it's soft, barely there, slightly nutty, a hint of something metallic at the back of your tongue. You chew, slowly, swallow, and then nothing happens. You blink, still breathing, still upright. The cold still gnaws at your fingertips, but now your mouth feels less empty. You eat another. Soon. Others are doing the same. There's no fire today. No bark. No charcoal crust. Just frost-kissed mushrooms, eaten raw in silence beneath grey skies. And strangely, it works. You sit on a stump, knees drawn up, watching your breath fog as you chew the next cap. The texture's not bad. The flavour is honest, unfiltered, like eating the forest without trying to improve it. Someone nearby mutters, "Good enough." Another nods, "Better than roots." A third just grunts and keeps eating. Historians still argue whether raw mushroom consumption was common or rare in Paleolithic life. Some species are completely safe uncooked, others less so. But when the firewood's damp, your body's tired, and the hunger's louder than your doubts, you make choices. Risk calculations become instinct. Quirky tidbit, certain edible mushrooms actually lose flavour when cooked. The raw version, while less appealing to modern sensibilities, offers subtle sweetness and crisp texture you won't get over fire. Stone Age people might not have said mouthfeel, but they knew what was easy to chew. You eat slowly, piece by piece, not feasting, just staving off the edge. A few caps here, a stem there. It's a modest meal, but you can feel it settle, like moss lining the walls of your hunger. Someone else brings back a handful of snow. They melt it on a flat stone and add a few mushroom slices. Soft soup, they say, smiling. It's mostly water, but warm, comforting, maybe even nourishing. By mid-afternoon, the sun returns, weak, tired, but golden. The air softens. Someone builds a small fire. The group gathers again, but no one cooks tonight. Instead, you share the raw mushrooms you found, one cap at a time, quietly, like they're sacred, not because of flavour, but because they're enough. You lean back against a rock, stomach no longer screaming. The air is cold again, but your chest is warm, full, in a quiet, modest way. And as the light fades, you realise something. There's power in less. No fire, no seasoning, just a bite, a breath, a pause. Sometimes that's all it takes. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll roast again. Char mushrooms on pine needles. Try new sticks. Play with fat and ash and bark. But not today. Today. You remember what hunger feels like when met with just enough. And you sleep well. Because the forest provided barely. But still, and that's all you asked. The first thing you see in the morning light is something glowing. You blink, unsure if it's a dream or just your eyes refusing to cooperate after sleep. But no, there it is, nestled under the roots of an old tree just beyond camp, almost hidden in the shadows. A mushroom. Its cap is a pale blue, faintly luminous in the dim dawn. Not shining like fire, but pulsing gently like it holds a secret. You step closer, slowly, instinctively careful not to breathe too hard. It's beautiful and obviously suspicious. You glance around. No animals nearby, no insects, no ants. Not even the fearless toddler who tried to eat a beetle last week reaches for it. You crouch, sniff the air. There's no stink, no rot, just a soft, earthy scent, laced with something cold. Not dangerous exactly, but unfamiliar. You call the others. They gather in slow circles, murmuring and shuffling. No one touches it. No one dares. Even the old woman who once chewed on a puffball for luck just squints and mutters something about forest warnings. The blue mushroom stays where it is, glowing softly, a tiny beacon of confusion. You've never seen one like this. No one has. You want to taste it. Of course you do, but your memory is full of cautionary tales now, of twitchy nights, of upside-down stomachs, of dreams that lasted too long. You've learned, sort of. So instead, You do something new. You don't eat it. Not yet. You mark the spot with a circle of stones. You step back. You sit. You watch. Someone starts humming, low and slow. The mushroom glows steadily. Later, you roast some known mushrooms, simple ones, safe. You chew them quietly by the fire, eyes drifting often to the glowing cap just beyond the tree line, and the whispers begin. Someone says it grew from the root of a tree that was struck by lightning. Another says it appeared overnight, like a gift. A few swear it's the spirit of a lost hunter returned in edible form. You don't know. Historians would someday call this moment a superstition, a folk belief, a myth. But tonight, in the soft dark, with fire crackling and stories swirling, it feels real. So you make the glowing mushroom sacred. You don't eat it. You tell the children to stay back. You tell the elders to keep an eye on it. And you begin weaving it into your words. The story changes every time it's told. In one version, the mushroom brings visions. In another, it sings when the wind hits right. One child insists it danced in the night and bowed to the moon. The facts blur, but the feeling remains. This mushroom is different. It becomes a symbol of restraint, of magic, of food you don't touch. Not because you can't, but because sometimes the forest gives you mystery, not answers. Quirky fact, some bioluminescent fungi do grow in forests, glowing faintly at night due to chemical reactions. While rare, it's entirely possible that prehistoric people witnessed them and wove them into spiritual or ritual belief systems. You lean back by the fire. Someone is sketching a circle in the dirt, drawing the mushroom from memory. Someone else adds lines of smoke above it. It's become legend already. And maybe that's the most powerful recipe of all. Not what you eat, but what you remember. Because here in this damp, flickering world, mushrooms aren't just food anymore. They're meaning. They're stories. They're the bridge between what your stomach needs and what your spirit wonders. And as the night deepens, you look once more at the glowing blue cap beneath the tree, and you feel full in a way that food alone never quite managed. Now the fire has faded, and the forest settles into a hush. The smoke drifts in lazy spirals, carrying with it the faintest sense of pine and soil and roasted memories. Around you, the figures once crouched over embers have curled into themselves, wrapped in fur, in warmth, in sleep. The mushrooms are done crackling, the sticks lie still, the caps have all been chewed and judged and remembered, and the glowing one still rests, untouched. A gentle blue heartbeat beneath the roots. The wind sighs, the leaves murmur, and your body begins to soften. You've chewed through every kind of mystery tonight, fermented piles, smoky caps, dream-filled batches, and crunchy forest floor mistakes. You've watched children learn, elders warn, ants lead. You followed flavour across bark and fire and silence. You've tasted fear, invention, and once or twice accidental genius. You've survived, and that's enough. Now, the air grows still, the forest hums low and far away, and your breath slows to match it. Somewhere out there, another group gathers mushrooms by moonlight. Somewhere, someone is poking a stick into the dirt, waiting for that first hiss of sap on stone. And maybe, just maybe, someone is staring at a glowing cap beneath a tree, heart beating slowly with wonder. Let them cook. Let them dream. Tonight, you sleep, wrapped in quiet, in smoke, in the steady weight of stories. You made it through another mushroom meal. Close your eyes. forget the taste of bark, and drift into the dark